The trailer that we got a little bit ago for the upcoming entry in Sony's Marvel Universe, Morbius, looks pretty freaking amazing. And we here at Screen Rant are super hyped to check it out. And this level of excitement has a lot to do with a few of the larger reveals that we got in that trailer. Of course, there was the graffiti that revealed that Spider-Man does exist in this universe and has apparently done some pretty bad things in the eyes of the everyman. But then there is the biggest one, the cameo by Michael Keaton as Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, which sets up a whole bunch of possibilities, including a potential Sinister Six team-up. But his appearance here has raised a few questions. How does a blue-collar man like Toomes know somebody who is a Nobel Prize Laureate? What exactly is he doing in this film at all? Well, it all could go back to a random background extra in Spider-Man Homecoming. A background extra that could very well be Michael Morbius himself. Sit back and take a load off as I break it down for you and explain how Morbius could be retconned into the Spider-Man film franchise, and why he probably will be. Let's get right into it. Before we get into how Morbius could be retconned into the Spider-Man films, specifically Spider-Man Homecoming, it might be a good idea to give you all a very brief sense of who exactly Morbius is and what he can do. Since odds are, unless you're a comic book fan, you might not know much about who the heck this guy even is. Morbius, the living vampire, made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 101 back in October of 1971, almost as a response to the February 1971 lifting of the ban on supernatural creatures, such as vampires, by the Comic Code Authority. Morbius was presented as a bit of a tragic character when he first appeared as an antagonist to the Webhead. He was a scientist who had contracted his vampirism while trying to find a cure for his own fatal blood disease, a backstory that the film seems to be following pretty closely. This process turns him into something that is referred to as a pseudo-vampire, meaning that he isn't a traditional vampire, in that he doesn't have the same weaknesses as OG Nightwalkers, like Dracula, for example. Sure, he needs to consume blood in order to survive, isn't a big fan of sunlight, and has a lot of the trademark abilities of a vampire. But wooden stakes aren't required to take him out, and religious iconography doesn't do diddly squat to him. Now, I mentioned that Morbius possesses the more standard abilities of vampires, but what are those exactly? Well, Morbius has the abilities that you would expect of a superhero. Super strength, super agility, regenerative healing, etc. But he can do more than that, of course. He has heightened senses, granting him stuff such as night vision, and the ability to use echolocation. He also has super sharp fangs and claws, and can achieve levitation via psionic gliding, granting him the ability to effectively fly for short distances. Oh, and he can hypnotize people, and when he bites them, he can turn them into underpowered pseudo-vampires that he can control mentally, effectively making them his own thralls, which is just neat. Also a little twisted. The Morbius solo flick does seem to be sticking pretty close to this original source material. In the trailer, we see Jared Leto as the character utilizing many of the abilities that we discussed a second ago, such as the echolocation and his super agility, which is pretty awesome. You know what else is pretty awesome? Looks like we might be seeing Morbius take on Matt Smith's Hunger, another pseudo-vampire. So expect some vampire on vampire carnage. Now, the Morbius film takes place as part of Sony's Marvel Universe, hereby referred to as the SMU, which is the same continuity as their 2018 venture, Venom. We haven't gotten any word yet if Tom Hardy is going to make an appearance in the film, but it honestly wouldn't surprise me. Maybe an after credits thing. I don't know, keep an eye out. Know what does surprise most people? The appearance of Spider-Man and Vulture, specifically the MCU versions of those characters. This is surprising though, since the SMU is not the MCU, and legally, it can't actually be. See, Sony holds the film rights to Spider-Man and the hundreds of associated characters, including Morbius and Venom. However, deals have been in place for a few years now to allow Spider-Man to appear within the larger cinematic universe. That being said, Sony hasn't exactly been subtle about the fact that they want the Webhead to make an appearance in their own universe. Though introducing a new Spider-Man while the other one is doing so well wouldn't exactly be a sound business decision. Luckily, it seems that Sony and Marvel have reached an agreement that will allow the SMU films to at least reference the MCU. doesn't make the films a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but definitely connects them in some small way. Look at the graffiti over that Spider-Man that we see in the trailer. The word murderer is scrawled across the wall. Now this could reference quite a few things, but for our money, it probably is meant to be a call out to the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. The biggest connection between the MCU and this film, though, has to be the appearance at the end of the trailer of Adrian Toomes, the Vulture himself. Now in this moment, not only is Toomes revealed to be in the SMU and the MCU, being played by Michael Keaton in both, but also that he apparently knows Michael Morbius personally, talking to him as if they have some history. But how exactly? Toomes, as established at the beginning of Spider-Man Homecoming, is largely just a blue-collar worker, running a company in charge of cleaning up after the Battle of New York. Meanwhile, Michael Morbius was a famous biochemist, who, as we see in the trailer, was winning a Nobel Prize. Not exactly the kind of guy you could really see grabbing a beer with some cleanup workers at the local dive bar. Well, what if we told you that Homecoming might give us an answer to this, and make the connection between the MCU and the SMU a lot stronger than you might think? Well, do you remember the mid-credit scene in Spider-Man Homecoming, where Toomes comes face to face with Matt Gargan, aka the Scorpion? Pay close attention to the people in the background. See that guy? The guy with longer hair and a beard? Sort of similar to how Jared Leto looks in Morbius? That guy, this theory argues, is Morbius. Now, picture this. Imagine that the beginning of Morbius takes place a little bit in the past, before the events of the first Spider-Man film. Things go down, Morbius gets transformed into the living vampire himself, and then he gets busted. Thrown in the clink for doing something. Something nasty, probably. Nasty enough that the largely good Michael Morbius would choose to stay in prison, even when his own superpowers would allow him to escape fairly easily. And it was there that he met Vulture. Now, there are some issues with this idea. First is the fact that the guy in the background has an eye patch. Now, obviously, with superhuman regeneration, Morbius probably wouldn't need an eye patch. But maybe his eye got hurt, and he chose to wear the eye patch to help conceal his powers from the other inmates. And of course, that isn't Jared Leto, no matter how much he looks like him. But that could be easily explained by the studio just not having cast him as Morbius yet. Now, there is also something in this trailer that potentially alludes to this being true. You know that shot that we talked about earlier of the graffiti wall? Check out Morbius's threads here. That orange shirt looks suspiciously like a prison jumpsuit. Sure, it's different from the white jumpsuits that Toomes and company wear, but he could have transferred to a different facility before having to escape from custody for some reason. Maybe he found out that hunger was causing some trouble, and escaped to go face down with him. So, okay, let's say that this is the case, which signs are pointing towards at least something in the middle. What could Morbius being connected to Toomes mean for the future? Well, with the Sony and Disney deal giving the webhead one more solo flick in the MCU, Sony has some time to sow the seeds for what could happen in the future of the SMU. And they've made it very well known that they would like to ultimately do a Sinister Six focused film. And now they find themselves in a situation where they are creating villain/anti-hero focused flicks with the likes of Venom and now Morbius. So Sony is in the perfect situation to take their time and properly set up the villain team. And perhaps Toomes is the key to all of it. What if Toomes is revealed to be the mastermind of the entire Sinister Six, acting as a sort of evil Nick Fury, pulling together Morbius, Venom, Scorpion maybe, I guess, and of course himself, along with a few others, to properly take on Spider-Man. This could make for a really hyped team-up, something like an evil Avengers. Now, we don't have any idea if Toomes has ever met Eddie Brock, though maybe during his time in prison, he came into contact with Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, who is being set up as the main baddie of Venom 2. So maybe instead Carnage will be on the team, with Venom working with Spider-Man to take them down. That could be pretty cool to see as well. All in all, I'm actually quite excited to see where the SMU goes, whether it is connected to the MCU or not. Venom was, for all its faults, actually a pretty decent flick, and a heck of a good time at the movies. And Morbius definitely looks to be cut from basically the same cloth as that film, so I'm expecting some good things from it. And honestly, as a fan of superhero films in general, as long as we're getting some good superpowered action, I'm a happy camper. And that is how we figure that Morbius and Toomes know each other in the Morbius solo flick. What did you think of this theory? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're down there, why not consider subscribing to Screen Rant for more awesome content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the movies.